I never thought I'd be that mom, the one whose daughter stops talking to them. It all blew up at Thanksgiving when Nina wouldn't stop recording for her mental health podcast. The microphone, the ring light, turning our family dinner into content. When she started explaining her CBD sponsorship deal, something in me snapped. I told her that her ex-boyfriend was right to dump her over that Cringe podcast where she shares everything about her anxiety and trauma. The look on her face. She just got up and left. No drama, no yelling, just gone. It's been 8 months now. She won't answer my calls or texts. She even skipped her grandmother's funeral. My own daughter won't even say my name anymore. I keep asking myself if I was really that wrong. I sit here in my home office, the ring light casting an unflattering glow on my face as I adjust the webcam. My hand trembles slightly as I push back a strand of hair that's fallen across my forehead. I take a deep breath and press record. I said something awful to my daughter last year. I didn't mean it, not like that, but she hasn't spoken to me since. The words hang in the air and I want to backtrack immediately, make myself sound better. But that's the problem, isn't it? I've been trying to frame this whole situation to make myself look like the concerned mother who just got caught up in the moment. The truth is messier than that. My daughter Nina was always the golden girl. Honor roll debate team captain, full scholarship to Northwestern, where she graduated with a degree in communications. She landed a great job at a PR firm right out of college. She had a 5-year plan, a nice boyfriend named Ethan who worked in finance, and a bright future ahead of her. Everything I had hoped for her. Then the pandemic hit, and like many people her age, Nina started therapy. At first, I was supportive. Mental health is important after all. But then she broke up with Ethan, quit her job, and decided to start a podcast about mental health. The Anxiety Chronicles, she called it. Each week, she would sit in front of a camera, just like I'm doing now, and talk about her panic attacks, her medication journey, her childhood traumas. Some of which involved me. She had all this potential, all these opportunities, and she chose to monetize her anxiety. I just didn't get it. In my day, we kept our problems private. We didn't broadcast them to the world and expect applause for it. I should know. I spent 27 years as a local news anchor in Connecticut. I reported on real news, real problems. I interviewed governors and senators. I covered natural disasters and school shootings. I learned to keep my emotions in check, to be professional, to separate my personal life from my public persona. Now I'm outdated. A relic. No one watches the evening news anymore. They get their information from TikTok and Instagram and podcasts hosted by people like my daughter who have no formal training, no journalistic integrity, just feelings and ring lights and sponsorship deals with CBD companies. Not everything has to be content. Some things are just private pain. That's what I believed. That's what I still believe if I'm being honest. But I didn't have to say what I said. It was Thanksgiving last year. Nina had been doing her podcast for about 6 months at that point. She had gained a decent following, around 20,000 subscribers. Nothing major, but enough that she was starting to get sponsorship deals and making almost as much as she had at her PR job. I had invited her to dinner, along with my sister Patricia, her husband Gerald, and their 2 teenagers. My ex-husband, Nina's father, was spending the holiday with his new wife in Tampa, which was fine by me. We've been divorced for 12 years and get along well enough for Nina's sake. I spent all day cooking, the way I always do. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, the works. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted to show Nina that there was stability and comfort in tradition, in family, in the things that had always anchored us before she decided to reinvent herself as a mental health influencer. She arrived carrying a tote bag full of equipment. A ring light, a microphone, her laptop. I bit my tongue as she set up in the living room, explaining that she wanted to record some ambient family chatter for a segment on navigating family dynamics during the holidays. It's going to be great content, she said, adjusting her microphone. My listeners are always asking for tips on dealing with family stress during the holidays. I poured myself a glass of wine and kept my mouth shut. Patricia helped me in the kitchen while Gerald watched football with the kids. Nina flitted between rooms, setting up her equipment, checking audio levels, taking photos of the table setting for her Instagram. By the time we sat down to eat, I was on my third glass of wine. The turkey was perfectly cooked, but I could barely taste it. Every time Nina spoke, it was about her podcast. How her latest episode on generational trauma had gone viral. How she had been invited to speak on a panel at a mental health conference. How her new CBD sponsor was sending her to Los Angeles in January. They make this amazing tincture for anxiety, she was saying, gesturing with her fork. It's completely changed my sleep patterns. I'm going to do a whole series on sleep hygiene when I get back from LA. I could feel something building inside me, a pressure behind my ribs. I looked at my sister, who was nodding encouragingly at Nina. At my nephew and niece, who were barely listening, absorbed in their phones. At Gerald, who was reaching for more mashed potatoes. No one seemed bothered by the fact that the entire dinner had become a backdrop for Nina's brand. That she was mining our family gathering for content. That she had traded a respectable career for talking about her feelings online. So anyway, Nina continued, taking a sip of water, the brand deal includes 5 sponsored posts, a dedicated podcast episode, and some TikTok content. They're really investing in mental health creators right now. How nice, I said, my voice tight. And what happens when the mental health trend dies down? Will you start talking about cryptocurrency or makeup or whatever else is paying the bills that month? The table got quiet. Nina looked at me, her expression a mixture of hurt and confusion. Mom, mental health isn't a trend, it's something that affects millions of people. My podcast helps them feel less alone. Of course it does, sweetie, I said, pouring more wine. And the fact that you get paid to talk about your personal problems has nothing to do with it. Callie, my sister, warned. What? I said. I'm just saying what we're all thinking. She quit a perfectly good job to sit in her apartment and talk about her anxiety. And now she's turned our Thanksgiving dinner into an episode. Everything has to be content. Everything has to be shared with strangers on the internet. Nina put down her fork. My work is important to me. I thought you would understand that. What I understand is that you've found a way to make money off of oversharing. You call it vulnerability, but really it's just drama. Always has been. The room was completely silent now. Even my niece and nephew had put down their phones and were watching us with wide eyes. Callie, that's enough, Patricia said firmly. But the wine and the resentment and the frustration had loosened something in me, and the words came out before I could stop them. No wonder your ex dumped you. Who wants to date someone who makes their trauma into a brand? The moment I said it, I knew I had gone too far. Nina's face went completely blank, a skill she had learned from me. Hide the hurt, never let them see you break. She pushed back her chair, stood up, and walked out of the dining room without a word, no scene, no yelling, just the air sucked out of the room and the sound of the front door closing softly behind her. Patricia looked at me with disgust. What is wrong with you? She needed to hear it. I said defensively, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. No, she didn't, Patricia said. She needed her mother to support her, not tear her down in front of the family. The rest of the dinner was ruined. The kids ate quickly and asked to be excused. Gerald made awkward small talk while Patricia glared at me across the table. As soon as they left, I sat alone at my dining room table, surrounded by half-eaten food and the hollow feeling that I had just made a terrible mistake. I texted Nina that night. I'm sorry for what I said. I had too much wine. Can we talk tomorrow? No response. I tried calling the next morning. It went straight to voicemail. By evening, I discovered she had blocked my number. I sent an email. Nina, please, I was wrong. Let's talk about this. The email bounced back. She had blocked my email address too. A week passed and I told myself she was just being dramatic. That's what I kept saying to friends who asked about her. Oh, you know Nina, always so sensitive. She'll come around. But she didn't come around. I tried calling from my work phone. I tried reaching out through social media, only to discover she had blocked me there too. It was as if I had been erased from her life with the push of a button. In desperation, I turned to the one place I knew I could still hear her voice, her podcast. I created an anonymous account and began listening to every episode, hoping for some clue, some indication that she missed me too. What I found instead was an episode titled, What to Do When Someone You Love Uses Your Pain Against You. She didn't mention me by name, but she didn't have to. She quoted what I had said at Thanksgiving word for word. When someone tells you that your mental health journey is just a brand, or that you deserve to be abandoned because you speak your truth, they're telling you who they are. Nina's voice came through my earbuds. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is believe them. I scrolled through the comments, looking for anyone who might take my side, who might suggest that family should be forgiven. Instead, I found hundreds of messages supporting Nina. This episode saved me from going back to my toxic mother. Classic boomer narcissist move, using your vulnerabilities against you. Eggshell parenting in action. So glad you're setting boundaries. I closed my laptop feeling sick. Was that how people saw me? As a toxic narcissist? As someone who would deliberately hurt her own child? That wasn't me. I loved Nina. I wanted what was best for her. I just didn't understand why she needed to broadcast her pain to the world. Why she couldn't just talk to me directly about whatever issues she had with our family. But as the weeks turned into months, and Nina's silence continued, I began to wonder if maybe I was wrong. If maybe there was something to this public vulnerability that I didn't understand. If maybe my generation's approach to mental health, to keeping everything buttoned up and proper, wasn't as healthy as I had always believed. The family began to take sides. Patricia stopped taking my calls after that Thanksgiving. My ex-husband sent me a terse email. You went too far, Callie. Fix this. But how could I fix it when Nina wouldn't even speak to me? I sent a handwritten letter, pouring my heart out on the page, explaining that I was scared for her, that I didn't understand her world, that I wanted to try. I didn't outright apologize because I still wasn't sure I was entirely wrong. But I did say I regretted hurting her. The letter was returned to me a week later. Return to sender, stamped across the envelope in bold red letters. After the letter was returned, I started listening to Nina's podcast religiously. It became my only connection to her, this disembodied voice coming through my speakers twice a week, talking about anxiety management techniques and self-care routines and the importance of boundaries. Always boundaries. I created an anonymous account called Mindful Listener 52 to avoid being recognized. I would check for new episodes the moment they dropped, usually Tuesdays and Fridays at 9 a.m. My entire schedule revolved around it. I'd make a cup of coffee, sit in my home office, and close my eyes, pretending she was talking to me directly. In one episode titled The Grief of Going No Contact, Nina spoke about how cutting ties with a family member can feel like a death. You mourn the relationship you had, but more than that, you mourn the relationship you wished you could have had, she said. The fantasy of being truly seen and accepted by someone who was supposed to love you unconditionally. I wondered if she was thinking of me as she recorded those words, if she was mourning our relationship, or if she had already moved past it. The thought made my chest tight. 3 months after Thanksgiving, she released the episode that confirmed all my fears. It was titled What to Do When Someone You Love Uses Your Pain Against You. The thumbnail showed Nina sitting cross-legged on her couch, looking directly at the camera with a stern expression I recognized from childhood. It was the same face she made when standing up to bullies on the playground. Today we're talking about emotional weaponization, she began. When someone takes the vulnerable parts of yourself that you've shared with them and uses those parts against you. I recently experienced this with someone very close to me. My stomach dropped as she continued. We were at a family gathering and I was excited to share some news about my podcast. A brand deal that would allow me to reach more people, help more listeners. Instead of being happy for me, this person said, and I quote, "No wonder your ex dumped you. Who wants to date someone who makes their trauma into a brand?" Hearing my own words repeated back to me made me flinch. They sounded so much harsher than I remembered, stripped of context and emotion and the wine-hazed moment in which I'd said them. In that moment, Nina continued, I realized this person had never truly supported my work. They'd been tolerating it maybe, but underneath was this current of judgment. The idea that mental health shouldn't be discussed openly, that vulnerability is weakness, that my generation is somehow wrong for wanting to heal out loud. I wanted to defend myself. To call her and say, "That's not fair, that's not what I meant." But of course I couldn't, she wouldn't take my call, and maybe she was right. Maybe that is what I meant deep down. The comments section of that episode was brutal. Hundreds of people sharing similar stories about parents who dismissed their mental health struggles, who made them feel small for seeking help, who used their vulnerabilities as weapons. "My mom does this exact same thing," one comment read. "She calls my anxiety attention-seeking and tells me I should just toughen up like her generation did, as if repressing everything is healthy. Classic boomer narcissist," another wrote. "They can't stand that we're breaking generational cycles of trauma. It threatens their whole worldview." "You're so brave for setting boundaries," said a third. "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the community you build around you. We're your family now." I read every single comment, feeling more isolated with each one. Was I really a narcissist? Was I the villain in my daughter's story? It didn't feel that way from inside my head. From here, I was just a mother concerned about her daughter's future, about the permanence of the internet, about the commodification of personal pain. But maybe that's what all the parents in these comments thought too. I started checking Nina's social media accounts using my sister's login information. Patricia had given me her password years ago when she was having technical issues, and she never changed it. I knew it was an invasion of privacy, but I was desperate for glimpses into my daughter's life. What I found was a Nina I barely recognized. She looked happy. There were photos of her at mental health conferences, on panels with other content creators, hiking with friends I'd never met. Her hair was different, shorter and dyed a soft lavender at the ends. Her style had changed, too, less corporate and more comfortable. In one photo, she was laughing with a tall woman with short dark hair. The caption read, "6 months with this one. Sometimes the universe takes something away to make room for something better." They were holding hands. Nina had never mentioned being interested in women before. There was a whole part of her life I knew nothing about. I scrolled through the comments looking for clues about their relationship. "You guys are goals. So happy for you both." "Marisol is the best thing that ever happened to you." Marisol. My daughter was in a serious relationship with someone named Marisol, and I was finding out about it through social media stalking. I felt a sharp pang of loss, of exclusion. These moments, these milestones were happening without me. One evening in April, about 4 months after our falling out, I got a call from Patricia. We hadn't spoken much since Thanksgiving, just terse texts about family matters. Her voice was cold when I answered. "Nina's podcast won an award," she said without preamble. "What kind of award?" I asked, trying to sound casual, as if I hadn't just been listening to Nina's latest episode about anxiety and sleep disturbances. "The Mental Health Media Award for Best Newcomer Podcast. There was a ceremony in New York last night. She gave a speech." My heart sank. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she thanked everyone, Callie. She thanked her friends, her girlfriend, her therapist, her followers. She even thanked Gerald and me. The only person she didn't mention was you." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I see. Do you see what you've done? She's thriving without you. She's building a life and a career that matters to her, and you're not a part of it because you couldn't keep your judgments to yourself." "That's not fair, Patricia." She cut me off completely over one comment. One comment. One comment that summarized years of subtle undermining, of dismissing her choices, of making her feel like she was never good enough unless she was living the life you wanted for her. I was silent, absorbing the accusation. "Gerald and I are having dinner with Nina and Marisol next weekend," Patricia continued. "If you want, I can tell her you've been asking about her." It was an olive branch, small but significant, a chance to begin repairing what I had broken. "Yes," I said quickly. "Please do. Tell her I miss her. Tell her I'm proud of her award." "Are you?" Patricia's voice was skeptical. "Are you really proud of her podcast, or are you just saying that because you want her back in your life?" The question stung because it hit so close to home. Was I proud of Nina for creating a mental health podcast that helped people, or was I just lonely without her? "I'm trying," I said finally. "I'm listening to her episodes. I'm trying to understand." Patricia sighed. "I'll tell her. But don't expect much. She's still hurt, Callie." After we hung up, I went to my computer and found the awards ceremony online. There was Nina, looking poised and professional in a burgundy pantsuit, her lavender-tipped hair swept back from her face. The audience applauded as she approached the podium. "Thank you so much for this honor," she began. "When I started the Anxiety Chronicles, it was just me in my bedroom talking into a microphone about panic attacks. I never imagined it would reach so many people or make such an impact." Her voice was strong and clear, so different from the hesitant way she used to speak in public. She thanked the award committee, her listeners, her girlfriend Marisol for showing me what healthy love looks like, and her aunt and uncle for being my family when I needed one most. Patricia was right. She didn't mention me at all. It was as if I had never existed in her life. As if the woman who had raised her, who had attended every school play and parent-teacher conference, who had helped her apply to colleges and move into her first apartment, had simply vanished from her narrative. I closed the video, unable to watch anymore. The silence in my house was deafening. I wandered from room to room looking at photos of Nina growing up. Her kindergarten graduation, her high school prom, her college acceptance day. Every picture she was smiling and I was standing beside her proud and present. Now I was just a ghost in her life, an unnamed absence. The person who had hurt her so badly that she couldn't even acknowledge my existence in her moment of triumph. A week later, Patricia called again. "I mentioned you to Nina," she said. I held my breath. "And she wasn't ready to talk about you. She said she needs more time." "More time? It's been months, Patricia. How much time does she need?" "As much as it takes." You hurt her deeply, Callie. Not just with what you said at Thanksgiving, but with your whole attitude toward her work, her life choices, her identity. She feels like you've never really seen her or accepted her for who she is. That's not true. I love her. Loving someone and accepting them are two different things. You can love your idea of Nina while rejecting the actual person she's become. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at nothing. Was Patricia right? Had I been loving an idealized version of my daughter rather than the real woman she had grown into? I thought about Nina's podcast, about the stories she told about her anxiety, her journey to self-acceptance, her relationships. I had always seen these revelations as unnecessary oversharing, as playing for sympathy or attention. But what if they were acts of courage? What if speaking openly about mental health was actually harder and braver than keeping everything bottled up the way my generation had been taught to do? The next day, I did something I had never done before. I left a comment on one of Nina's podcast episodes. Not the one about me, but a more recent one about finding your authentic voice. This really made me think about how I communicate with the people I love. I wrote under my anonymous username. "Thank you for your honesty and vulnerability. It's helping me see things differently." It wasn't much, but it was true. And it was a start. Nina must have been online at the same time, because a heart appeared under my comment almost immediately. She had no idea it was from me, of course, but seeing that tiny digital acknowledgement made my own heart swell with a complicated mixture of hope and sadness. In the months that followed, I kept listening to the podcast, kept leaving supportive comments, kept trying to understand my daughter's world from a distance. I joined online forums about mental health, read books about generational differences, even started seeing a therapist myself to work through my own issues with control and acceptance. I was trying to become the kind of mother who could embrace Nina as she was, not as I wanted her to be. The kind of mother who could admit when she was wrong, who could learn and grow and change. The kind of mother Nina might someday want back in her life. But as spring turned to summer, and Nina continued to ignore my attempts at reconciliation, I began to wonder if it was too late. If some wounds are too deep to heal. If some words once spoken can never truly be taken back. Summer turned to fall, and the silence between Nina and me stretched on like an endless winter. I kept up my ritual of listening to her podcast, leaving comments under my anonymous username, watching her life unfold from a distance. It was a pale substitute for real connection, but it was all I had. My birthday came in September. I woke up hopping against hope that maybe, just maybe, Nina would reach out. A text, an email, even a generic social media message would have been enough. But my phone remained silent all day. Patricia called that evening. "Happy birthday, Callie," she said, her voice warmer than it had been in months. We'd been slowly rebuilding our relationship through careful conversations that danced around the Nina-shaped hole in our lives. Thanks, I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. Did you talk to Nina today? There was a pause on the other end of the line. She knows it's your birthday, Callie, and she still doesn't want to talk to me. She's still processing. These things take time. 10 months isn't enough time to process one terrible comment, Patricia sighed. You know, it's not just about that one comment, it's about a pattern. It's about the way you've always subtly undermined her choices if they didn't align with what you wanted for her. That's not fair, I said automatically, but the protest felt hollow even to my own ears. Maybe not, Patricia conceded. But it's how she feels. And feelings are real even when they're complicated. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Nina had posted a new podcast episode that morning. The title made my heart skip: Birthdays, Boundaries, and Breaking Free from Obligation. I clicked play with trembling fingers. Today I want to talk about the expectations that come with certain dates on the calendar. Nina's voice filled my home office. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. These are the days when we feel the weight of family obligations most heavily, when we're expected to set aside our boundaries and perform connection, even with people who have hurt us. My throat tightened. She was talking about me, about my birthday. I woke up this morning thinking about someone whose birthday is today, she continued. Someone who was once central to my life but is now a peripheral figure by my choice. I felt that familiar tug of obligation, that voice saying, just send a text. It's the right thing to do, it's just one day. I held my breath, waiting for what came next. But then I remembered what my therapist told me: boundaries aren't just for ordinary days. In fact, they're most important on the days when we're most tempted to break them. If I reach out today out of obligation rather than genuine desire, I'm not respecting my own needs. I'm not honoring the distance I've created for my own well-being. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. She had thought about me today. She had consciously decided not to reach out. It was both a tiny comfort and a fresh wound. So to anyone listening who's struggling with a similar situation today, I want you to know it's okay to maintain your boundaries, even on birthdays, even on holidays, even when it feels hard. Your healing doesn't take a day off just because the calendar says it should. I closed the laptop, unable to listen anymore. My daughter was using my birthday as a teaching moment for her followers. My pain was becoming content, just like I had accused her of doing with her own pain. The irony wasn't lost on me. October brought another family rift. My brother-in-law Gerald called one evening, his voice uncharacteristically serious. Callie, I need to tell you something and you're not going to like it. My mind immediately went to Nina. Is she okay? Did something happen? Nina's fine, he assured me quickly. It's about Thanksgiving. Patricia and I have been invited to spend it with Nina and Marisol in their new apartment. Oh, I said, the word small and inadequate for the hurt I felt. I see. We said yes, Gerald continued, apologetic but firm. The kids are going too. They missed their cousin. My nephew and niece, who had witnessed my cruel outburst last Thanksgiving, were now choosing Nina's side too. The family was aligning and I was the one left out in the cold. You have to understand our position, Gerald said. We can't just cut Nina out of our lives because you two are having issues. I would never ask you to do that, I said, though a selfish part of me wished they would show more loyalty to me. But why are you telling me this now? Thanksgiving is still weeks away. There was an uncomfortable pause. Nina's visiting this weekend, staying with us for a few days while she's in town for a mental health conference. Patricia didn't want you showing up unannounced and causing a scene. The implication that I couldn't control myself around my own daughter stung. I wouldn't do that, Gerald. I know, but emotions run high with family stuff. We just thought you should be prepared in case you see her car in our driveway or run into her around town. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, staring at the wall. Nina would be less than 3 miles away from me this weekend. I could drive to Patricia's house in 7 minutes. I could knock on the door, force a confrontation, demand to be heard, but what would that accomplish? It would only reinforce what Nina already believed about me, that I didn't respect her boundaries, that I put my needs above hers, that I was, as one commenter had put it, a classic boomer narcissist. No, I wouldn't go to Patricia's house. I wouldn't create a scene. But I couldn't just sit at home either, knowing my daughter was so close yet so unreachable. The day Nina arrived in town, I drove past Patricia's house twice. I told myself I just wanted to see if she was there yet, but it was more than that. I needed some tangible proof that she still existed in the same physical world as me, not just as a voice through my computer speakers. Her car was there the second time I drove by, a blue Honda CR-V parked behind Patricia's Subaru. I slowed down, heart pounding, half hopping and half dreading that the front door might open and Nina would step out, see me, and maybe, just maybe, wave or smile or show some sign that reconciliation was possible. But the house remained closed and quiet, and eventually I drove away, feeling foolish and more alone than ever. That night, I drank too much wine and wrote an email I knew I shouldn't send. It was full of hurt and anger and love and regret, a messy outpouring of all the emotions I'd been bottling up for the past year. I read it over 3 times, then deleted it without sending. No good would come from piling more words onto the ones that had already driven us apart. The next day, scrolling through social media, I saw that Patricia had posted a photo. Nina and Marisol standing in front of the local botanical gardens, their arms around each other, smiling widely. Patricia had captioned it, "Lovely day with these two amazing women, so proud of the community they're building." The community they're building, as if Marisol had replaced me in Nina's life. As if my daughter had found a new family, a chosen family that didn't include her mother. I clicked on the comments, a masochistic habit I couldn't seem to break. Beautiful couple, we love them both so much. Cannot wait for Thanksgiving with you all. Family is who shows up for you. So glad Nina has found hers. Each comment felt like a personal attack, though I knew they weren't directed at me specifically. No one even mentioned my absence. It was as if I had never been part of the picture at all. I closed my laptop and went for a long walk, trying to clear my head. The trees were starting to turn, flashes of red and gold against the fading blue sky. Nina had always loved fall. When she was little, we would collect colorful leaves and press them between the pages of heavy books, preserving their beauty for the long winter ahead. Now I was the one pressed between pages, frozen in time while Nina moved forward without me. The image made me stop in the middle of the path, overwhelmed by the weight of what I had lost. When I returned home, there was a missed call from Patricia. I called back immediately, hoping it might be about Nina. "She saw you," Patricia said without preamble. My heart stopped. "What?" "Nina saw you driving by the house yesterday. She thought it might be you, and then Gerald confirmed it was your car." I didn't mean to upset her, I said quickly. "I just wanted to see if she was there. I wasn't going to come in or anything." "She wasn't upset, Callie. She was concerned about you. She thought you looked sad." The words hit me hard. Even after everything, Nina was worried about me. She had noticed my sadness from a passing car. Did she say anything else? I asked, hardly daring to hope. "She asked if you were taking care of yourself." "I told her you were struggling but managing." She nodded and didn't say more. It wasn't much, but it was something, a tiny crack in the wall between us. "Patricia, please tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I miss her every day. Tell her I'm listening to her podcast and trying to understand her perspective. Tell her anything that might help." "I've told her all that already, Callie. She knows. She's just not ready to talk to you directly, but this is progress. A few months ago, she wouldn't even say your name. She wouldn't. No, she would just call you her or my mother when she had to refer to you at all. The fact that she asked about you by name is a good sign." After we hung up, I clung to that small piece of hope. Nina had said my name. She had noticed I looked sad. She had asked if I was taking care of myself. These were tiny steps, but they were something to hold on to. The next weekend, I did something I'd been contemplating for months. I made an appointment with a therapist who specialized in family estrangement. His name was Dr. Ramirez, and he had a kind face and an office filled with plants. "What brings you here today?" he asked after the initial paperwork was complete. "My daughter won't speak to me," I said, the words still painful to say out loud after all this time. "We had a fight last Thanksgiving, and she cut me off completely." I said something cruel about her podcast, about how her ex was right to dump her over it. I was wrong, but I don't know how to fix things when she won't even talk to me. Dr. Ramirez nodded thoughtfully. That sounds incredibly painful. Can you tell me a bit more about your relationship with your daughter before this incident? For the next hour, I poured out the story of Nina and me. How close we had been when she was young. How proud I was of her academic and professional achievements. How confused and disappointed I'd felt when she left her PR job to start a mental health podcast. How I had never fully supported her new career, even though I pretended to. It sounds like there might have been tensions building for some time, Dr. Ramirez observed. The comment at Thanksgiving might have been the breaking point, not the whole problem. I nodded reluctantly. Her aunt says the same thing, that it was a pattern of me subtly undermining her choices. And how do you feel about that assessment? I took a deep breath. I think they might be right. I didn't see it that way at the time, but listening to Nina's podcast these past months, hearing her talk about her anxiety, her need for authenticity, her journey to self-acceptance, I realize now that I never really tried to understand what she needed. I just wanted her to fit into the life I thought she should have. That's a powerful realization, Dr. Ramirez said. And a good starting point for our work together. As I left his office, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. It was hard to admit my own role in the rift with Nina, to acknowledge that the problem wasn't just one bad moment but a pattern of behavior that had made my daughter feel unseen and unaccepted. But it was also freeing in a way. I couldn't change the past, but I could work on myself, on becoming the kind of mother who might someday deserve Nina's forgiveness. When I got home, I opened my laptop to check if Nina had posted any new content. There was a new episode, uploaded just hours ago. The title made my breath catch. The space between forgiveness and reconciliation. I clicked play, both eager and afraid to hear what she had to say. I listened to Nina's episode on forgiveness with my heart in my throat. Her voice came through clear and measured as she explained the difference between forgiving someone and allowing them back into your life. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself, she said. It's releasing the anger and resentment that keeps you tethered to a painful past. But reconciliation is different. Reconciliation requires trust, accountability, and change from both parties. You can forgive someone without reconciling with them. I wondered which category I fell into. Had Nina forgiven me but decided not to reconcile? Or was she still working on forgiveness itself? The uncertainty was agonizing. November arrived, bringing with it the anniversary of our falling out. I tried not to dwell on it, keeping busy with work and therapy and the mindfulness practices Dr. Ramirez had recommended. But as Thanksgiving approached, the weight of the past year pressed down on me. I had made plans to spend the holiday with a few colleagues who were also without family for various reasons. We would meet at Diane's house, everyone bringing a dish, a casual affair designed to minimize the emotional landmines of a traditional family Thanksgiving. I was bringing cranberry sauce and a pie, store-bought, because I couldn't summon the energy to cook this year. 2 days before Thanksgiving, my mother called. At 85, she had slowed down considerably in recent years, but remained sharp-minded and blunt-spoken. "Callie, I've been thinking about this situation with Nina," she said without preamble. "It's gone on long enough. Mom, it's complicated. It's only as complicated as you make it. You said something hurtful, you apologized, now she needs to get over it." I sighed, realizing how similar her attitude was to my own initial response to the rift with Nina. It's not that simple. There's a pattern of behavior I need to address. What pattern? You were a good mother. You provided for her, supported her education, gave her every opportunity. Yes, but I also made her feel like her choices weren't valid if they didn't align with what I wanted for her. I dismissed her mental health journey, her podcast, her whole identity, really. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, that podcast is a bit much, talking about private matters to strangers on the internet." See, that's exactly the attitude I'm trying to change, Mom. Nina's work is important to her, and it helps people. I need to respect that, even if I don't fully understand it. Another pause, longer this time. "You sound different, Callie." "I've been going to therapy. It's helping me see things from Nina's perspective." My mother made a dismissive noise. "Therapy? In my day, we didn't need therapy. We just got on with things." And maybe that wasn't always the healthiest approach, I said gently. Maybe some of us are still carrying wounds from just getting on with things instead of addressing our pain. The conversation shifted to safer topics after that, but I could tell my mother was unsettled by my new perspective. She belonged to a generation that viewed mental health struggles as weaknesses to be overcome through sheer force of will. It was the worldview I had inherited from her, the one I had unconsciously imposed on Nina, the one I was now working to dismantle in myself. After we hung up, I thought about generational trauma, a concept I'd learned about from Nina's podcast in my sessions with Dr. Ramirez. How patterns of behavior, communication styles, and coping mechanisms are passed down from parent to child, often without anyone noticing until someone like Nina decides to break the cycle. The day before Thanksgiving, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, there was a brief silence before a woman's voice spoke. Ms. Brevner. This is Marisol Diaz, Nina's partner. I nearly dropped the phone in shock. Marisol, yes, hello. I'm calling because Nina doesn't know I'm calling, and I'd appreciate if you kept it that way for now. My heart raced. Of course, is everything okay? Is Nina all right? Nina is fine physically, but emotionally, this estrangement has been very difficult for her. She puts on a brave face for her podcast and her followers, but in private, she struggles. She misses you. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by this unexpected revelation. I miss her too, so much. I believe you, which is why I'm calling. Nina's grandmother, your mother, reached out to her yesterday. I felt a spike of alarm. My mother called Nina. What did she say? She told Nina that she should, and I quote, stop this childish silent treatment and come to Thanksgiving dinner to make peace with her mother. She said some other things too, about Nina's podcast being attention-seeking and therapy being a crutch for weak people. I groaned, imagining how those words must have landed with Nina. I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was going to call her. We just talked about the situation yesterday, but I never suggested she reach out. Nina was very upset, not just by what your mother said, but by the timing. She's been considering opening communication with you again slowly on her own terms. This felt like pressure, like her boundaries weren't being respected again. I felt a conflicting rush of hope and dismay. Nina had been considering reaching out to me, and now my mother's interference might have set that back. What can I do? I asked. Should I call her, send an email? No, Marisol said firmly. Give her space. I'm calling because I want you to know she's not indifferent to you. This separation has been as painful for her as it has been for you. But she needs to approach reconciliation in her own way when she's ready. I understand, and thank you for telling me. It helps to know she's been thinking about it too. Just keep doing what you're doing. She sees your comments on her podcast, I froze. What? She recognized your writing style months ago. Mindful Listener 52 isn't exactly a sophisticated pseudonym, Ms. Brevner. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. Oh God, she must think I'm stalking her. Actually, she appreciates the support. She doesn't know if you really understand her work now or if you're just trying to get back in her good graces, but the fact that you're making an effort means something to her. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Nina knew I was listening to her podcast. She knew I was leaving comments. She had been considering reaching out to me. And now my mother had potentially ruined that progress with her well-intentioned but ham-fisted intervention. I called my mother immediately. Mom, did you call Nina yesterday? Yes, I did. Somebody needed to knock some sense into this situation. Mom, that wasn't your place. Nina has set boundaries that we need to respect. Boundaries, schmoundaries, she's your daughter. Family doesn't cut each other off over one mistake. It wasn't just one mistake, Mom. And even if it was, Nina has the right to take the time and space she needs to heal. Your call has set things back, not moved them forward. My mother was silent for a moment. I was trying to help. I know, but this is between Nina and me. Please don't contact her again unless she reaches out to you first. Thanksgiving Day arrived, gray and drizzly. I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, thinking about Nina and Marisol spending the day with Patricia and her family. Would they discuss me? Would Nina tell them about my mother's call? Would they all agree that I came from a family of boundary stompers who couldn't respect her needs? I drove to Diane's house with the cranberry sauce and pie, forcing a smile as I greeted my colleagues. We had a pleasant enough meal, everyone carefully avoiding personal questions, sticking to safe topics like work and movies and the unusually mild weather we'd been having. I excused myself early, claiming a headache, and drove home in the gathering darkness. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone pinged with a notification. A new episode of Nina's podcast had just dropped. On Thanksgiving Day, when she should have been enjoying dinner with Patricia and her family. I rushed inside, opened my laptop, and clicked on the link. The episode was titled When Family Holidays Trigger Grief. Nina's voice sounded tired as she began. I wasn't planning to record today, but something happened that brought up a lot of feelings, and I thought maybe sharing them might help others who are struggling with family estrangement during the holidays. She explained that her grandmother had called her, pressuring her to reconcile with her mother. It was a reminder of how families often prioritize the appearance of harmony over the reality of healthy relationships. The message was clear. My boundaries are less important than everyone sitting around the same table pretending everything is fine. I winced, recognizing the truth in her words. How many family gatherings had I sat through over the years, smiling through gritted teeth, ignoring undercurrents of tension for the sake of keeping the peace? But here's what I've learned this year, Nina continued. True healing can't happen in an environment where your feelings are invalidated, where your needs are dismissed as drama or oversensitivity. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to set a boundary and hold it, even when it's painful, even when it means spending holidays away from people you care about. She paused, and I could hear her take a deep breath. I do miss my mother. That's the complicated truth I don't often share here. I miss the good parts of our relationship. I miss her laugh, her fierce protectiveness, the way she could make any space feel like home. But I don't miss the judgment, the subtle digs, the feeling that I was never quite measuring up to her expectations. Tears streamed down my face as I listened. She missed me. Despite everything, she missed me. I know she's been listening to this podcast. I know she's been leaving comments under an anonymous username. I see her trying to understand, to engage with the work I'm doing. And part of me wants to reach out, to begin rebuilding what we lost. But another part is still afraid that nothing has really changed, that the patterns would just reassert themselves if I let her back into my life. She was quiet for a moment, and I held my breath, waiting for what came next. So if you're listening, Mom, and I think you are, I want you to know that I see your efforts. I appreciate them, but I'm not ready yet. I need more time, more evidence that you truly understand why your words hurt so deeply, why this isn't just about one comment at one dinner, but about a lifetime of feeling like my choices were only acceptable if they aligned with your vision for my life. I nodded, though of course she couldn't see me. I understood now. I was trying to understand more every day. To everyone else listening who's spending this holiday separated from family, whether by choice or circumstance, I want you to know that you're not alone. Grief and relief can coexist. You can miss someone and still know that the distance between you is necessary for your well-being. That's where I am today, holding both the missing and the knowing, the grief and the relief. And wherever you are in your journey, I'm right there with you. The episode ended, and I sat in silence, processing what I'd heard. It wasn't the reconciliation I'd been hoping for, but it was communication of a sort. Nina was speaking to me directly for the first time in nearly a year, acknowledging my efforts, explaining her hesitation, leaving the door cracked open for a future where we might find our way back to each other. I opened the comment section, staring at the blinking cursor. Should I respond as mindful listener 52, knowing now that Nina had recognized me months ago? Or should I respect her request for more time and stay silent? In the end, I didn't comment. Instead, I opened a new document on my computer and began typing a letter I had no intention of sending. A letter detailing all the ways I had failed to see Nina clearly, all the times I had prioritized my expectations over her needs, all the judgments I had made without trying to understand her perspective. A letter apologizing not just for the cruel words at Thanksgiving dinner, but for the lifetime of subtle messages that had preceded them. Writing it all down was cathartic, a way of making concrete the insights I'd been gathering through therapy and Nina's podcast. When I finished, I saved the document but didn't print it. This wasn't about trying to win Nina back with a grand gesture. It was about doing the internal work necessary to be worthy of reconciliation if and when she was ready. The next morning, I woke to a text from Patricia. Mom is in the hospital, suspected stroke. St. Mary's, room 412. I dressed quickly and drove to the hospital, my mind racing. My mother was 85, still independent but increasingly frail. A stroke could change everything in an instant. When I arrived at room 412, I paused outside the door, hearing voices within. One of them was Nina's. I stood frozen outside the hospital room, my hand raised to knock but unable to complete the motion. Nina was inside. After nearly a year of separation, my daughter was just a few feet away, and I had no idea how to bridge that distance. Taking a deep breath, I knocked softly and pushed the door open. The scene inside was surreal. My mother lay in the hospital bed, looking small and pale against the white sheets, an IV in her arm and monitors beeping steadily beside her. Patricia sat in a chair to her right, and on the left, standing with her back to the door, was Nina. They all turned to look at me as I entered. Patricia nodded in greeting. My mother raised her hand slightly in acknowledgement. And Nina, my Nina, looked directly at me for the first time in almost a year. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, the lavender tips now a soft blue. She was wearing glasses I'd never seen before, stylish tortoiseshell frames that suited her face. She looked more confident, more self-possessed than I remembered. Mom, she said, the word falling between us like a stone in still water. Nina, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't expect to see you here. Aunt Patricia called me, she said. I wanted to make sure Grandma was okay. I nodded, then turned my attention to my mother. How are you feeling, Mom? Like I've been hit by a truck, she grumbled, her voice weaker than usual but still carrying that familiar note of stubbornness. These doctors are making a fuss over nothing. I just got a little dizzy. The neurologist says it was a minor stroke, Patricia corrected gently. You're lucky Nina was visiting for the weekend and knew the signs. If she hadn't called the ambulance right away, it could have been much worse. My eyes darted back to Nina. You were visiting for the weekend? She nodded. I was staying with Aunt Patricia. We had plans to go to the winter craft fair. The winter craft fair? Something we used to do together every year when she was growing up. Now Patricia had taken my place in that tradition just as she had for Thanksgiving. The knowledge stung, but I swallowed the hurt. This wasn't about me or my feelings. It was about my mother's health. The doctor said Grandma will need someone to stay with her for a while after she's discharged, Nina continued, her tone professional, detached. We were just discussing options. I can take care of her, I said immediately. She can stay with me or I can stay at her house, whatever works best. My mother made a dismissive noise. I don't need anyone hovering over me. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Mom, you had a stroke, I said firmly. You need supervision at least for a little while. Your mother's right, Alina, Patricia added. The doctor was very clear about this. My mother looked from Patricia to me to Nina, her expression mutinous. Then unexpectedly she sighed. Fine, but I'm staying in my own home. You can come to me. The conversation turned to logistics, to medication schedules and follow-up appointments and necessary modifications to my mother's house. Throughout it all, Nina remained polite but distant, addressing me only when absolutely necessary, her voice careful and controlled. After about an hour, a nurse came in to check my mother's vitals and suggested we let her rest. We filed out into the hallway, the three of us standing awkwardly in the sterile hospital corridor. I should get going, Nina said, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. Marisol is waiting at Aunt Patricia's. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. What had I expected? That our first encounter in a year would lead to an immediate reconciliation? That we'd fall into each other's arms and all would be forgiven? Of course not. This was real life, not a Hallmark movie. It was good to see you, Nina, I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. She looked at me, really looked at me for a long moment. It was good to see you too, Mom. And then she was walking away, her steps quick and purposeful, leaving me standing there with the echo of those simple words reverberating in my chest. She had called me Mom, not my mother or her or nothing at all. Mom, Patricia touched my arm. She's trying, Callie. This is a big step for her. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without breaking down in tears. Why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow night? Mom should be discharged by then, and we're all going to discuss the care schedule. Nina and Marisol will be there. I hesitated, torn between eagerness and fear. Are you sure that's a good idea? I don't want to push Nina if she's not ready. It was her idea, Patricia said. She suggested it when we were making plans earlier. The knowledge that Nina had initiated the invitation sent a surge of hope through me. Then yes, I'd love to come. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying those few moments with Nina in my mind, analyzing every word, every gesture, every flicker of expression on her face. Had she seemed angry, sad, indifferent? I couldn't tell. The Nina I had encountered at the hospital was a carefully composed version of my daughter, revealing nothing of her true feelings. I thought about what she had said in her Thanksgiving podcast, about seeing my efforts, appreciating them, but not being ready to reconcile. Had something changed since then? Or was this dinner invitation simply a practical matter, a necessary evil to coordinate our mother's care? The next day dragged endlessly. I cleaned my house, though no one would see it. I tried to work on an article I was writing for the local paper, a freelance gig I'd picked up in retirement, but I couldn't focus. I changed my outfit 3 times before settling on a simple blue sweater and jeans, nothing too formal, nothing that screamed trying too hard. When I finally drove to Patricia's house that evening, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. My mother had been discharged that afternoon, and Patricia had brought her back to her own home with a home health aide for the night. Tomorrow we would begin the rotation of family members staying with her during her recovery. I parked behind a car I didn't recognize, presumably Marisol's. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Patricia answered, greeting me with a quick hug. Come in, everyone's in the dining room. We've just started eating. I followed her through the house, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. And there they were, seated around Patricia's large oak dining table. Gerald, my mother in a wheelchair positioned at the head of the table, Nina, and beside her, a woman with short dark hair and warm brown eyes who must be Marisol. Callie, glad you could make it, Gerald said, standing to pull out a chair for me. We've just started on the lasagna. I took the offered seat, which happened to be directly across from Nina and Marisol. Nina met my eyes briefly, then looked back down at her plate. Mom, this is Marisol, she said after a moment. Marisol, this is my mother, Callie. Marisol extended her hand across the table. It's nice to finally meet you, Ms. Brevner. Please call me Callie, I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, her smile genuine but reserved. I could see why Nina was drawn to her. There was a steadiness about her, a quiet confidence. The conversation was stilted at first, everyone carefully navigating around the elephant in the room. We discussed my mother's care schedule, dividing up days and nights among the 4 of us, Marisol offering to help when she wasn't working her shifts as an ER nurse. I can take most of the overnight shifts, I volunteered. I'm not working full-time anymore, so my schedule is flexible. Are you sure? Patricia asked. That's a lot to take on. I'm sure. I want to help. Nina looked at me thoughtfully. We could split the overnight shifts. I'm working remotely this month anyway, so I can record the podcast from Grandma's house as easily as from my apartment. It was the first time she had suggested doing something together, even if that something was just taking turns sleeping at my mother's house. I tried not to let my excitement show too obviously. That would be great, I said casually. Thank you. As the meal progressed, the atmosphere gradually relaxed. Gerald told a funny story about a client at his law firm. Patricia mentioned a new exhibit at the art museum she wanted to check out. My mother, despite her condition, managed to critique the lasagna and suggest 3 ways it could be improved. And then, during a lull in the conversation, Marisol turned to me. Nina tells me you've been listening to her podcast. I felt my face flush. Yes, I have. It's very good. Very insightful. Nina was watching me, her expression unreadable. You've been leaving comments too. I swallowed hard. I have. I hope that was okay. I wasn't trying to invade your privacy. I just wanted to understand your work better. It was okay, Nina said. Some of your observations were actually helpful. Really? I couldn't hide my surprise. Yes, especially your comment on the episode about generational trauma, about how healing isn't linear. I quoted it in my notes for the follow-up episode. I remembered that comment. I had written it after a particularly intense therapy session with Dr. Ramirez, where we had discussed how healing often involves moving forward, then backward, then sideways before making progress again. I meant what I wrote, I said. I've been learning a lot this past year. About myself, about the ways I've hurt you without intending to, about the patterns I've been repeating without realizing it. The table fell silent. Even my mother seemed to sense the significance of the moment and held her tongue. Nina set down her fork. I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you've been trying to understand my perspective, even from a distance. I have, I said earnestly. I've been in therapy. I've been reading books about generational trauma and emotional invalidation. I've been trying to become the kind of mother who deserves to be in your life. Nina's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I never wanted you out of my life, Mom. I just needed you to see me, really see me, not just the version of me you wanted me to be. I see you now, I said, my own voice thick with emotion. I see a strong, compassionate woman who's built a meaningful career helping others, who's found a loving relationship with someone who supports her whole self, who had the courage to set boundaries when she needed to, even when it was painful. I'm so proud of who you are, Nina, not despite your choices, but because of them. A tear slipped down Nina's cheek. Marisol put a hand on her back, a silent gesture of support. I can't promise I'll never mess up again, I continued. I'm still learning, still working on breaking old habits, but I can promise that I'll keep trying, that I'll listen when you tell me I've hurt you, that I'll respect your boundaries even when I don't fully understand them. Nina wiped away her tear. That's all I've ever wanted. The moment was broken by my mother's loud sigh. Well, thank goodness that's settled. Now can someone please get me another serving of this mediocre lasagna? Patricia rolled her eyes, but the tension had been broken. The conversation resumed, lighter now, more natural. Nina and I didn't speak directly to each other again during the meal, but something had shifted between us. A door that had been firmly closed was now, if not wide open, at least slightly ajar. After dinner, as everyone was helping to clear the table, Nina approached me in the kitchen. I'm staying at Grandma's tonight, she said. The home health aide will be there until morning, but I wanted to get settled in, learn the routine before my official shift tomorrow. I nodded. That makes sense. I'm sure Mom appreciates it, even if she'd never admit it. Nina hesitated, then said, if you want, you could come by tomorrow afternoon, before your shift starts. We could talk more, just the two of us. My heart leapt. I'd like that very much. Around 2, Grandma usually naps then. 2 is perfect. The next day I arrived at my mother's house at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying a bag of groceries and a peace offering of sorts. Nina's favorite tea, a spiced chai blend she had loved since college. I knocked softly, mindful of my mother's nap time. Nina opened the door, looking tired but composed. Hi, Mom, come in. She led me to the kitchen where we put away the groceries in companionable silence. Then she filled the kettle and set it on the stove. Grandma's asleep, she said. The stroke affected her more than she wants to admit. She gets tired easily now. That must be scary for her, I said. She's always been so independent. Nina nodded. Yeah, it's been an adjustment, but the doctor says she should make a full recovery with time and physical therapy. The kettle whistled, and Nina busied herself making tea. I noticed she reached automatically for the spiced chai I had brought, preparing 2 mugs without asking if that's what I wanted. She remembered my preferences too. We settled at the kitchen table, steam rising from our mugs, the familiar scent of cinnamon and cardamom filling the air between us. I've missed this, I said softly. Just sitting with you having tea. Nina cupped her hands around her mug. I've missed it too. I'm so sorry, Nina. For what I said at Thanksgiving, yes, but for all of it. For making you feel like your choices weren't valid unless they matched what I wanted for you. For dismissing your podcast, your mental health journey, the person you were becoming. I was wrong and I hurt you deeply and I'm truly sorry. She took a sip of her tea, considering my words. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge the pattern, not just the incident. I've had a lot of time to reflect, I said, and to listen to your podcast. You're really good at what you do, you're helping people. A small smile tugged at her lips. Thanks. It means more than you know to hear you say that. We talked for over an hour, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. She told me about her podcast, about the community she had built, about the speaking engagements and workshops she had planned for the coming year. I told her about my therapy journey, about the insights I had gained, about the letter I had written but never sent. I'd like to read it sometime, she said, if you're comfortable sharing it. Of course, I said. It's yours whenever you want it. As our conversation wound down, Nina glanced at the clock. Grandma will be waking up soon. She'll need her medication and something to eat. I nodded, reluctant for our time together to end but understanding the practicalities. I should get going then. Let you handle that before I come back for the night shift. Actually, Nina said, a hint of hesitation in her voice, I was thinking maybe you could stay. Help me with Grandma, and then we could have dinner together before your official shift starts. If you want to, that is. I'd love that, I said, my heart full. As we worked together to prepare my mother's medication and a light meal, moving around each other in the familiar kitchen with an ease that surprised me after so much time apart, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Hope. Not just the desperate hope of those early months when I had clung to any sign that Nina might forgive me someday, but a grounded, peaceful hope based on real progress, real communication, real change. We weren't fully reconciled yet. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild, patterns to break. But we had taken the first steps on that path together. And for now, that was enough. Later that evening, after my mother had gone to bed, Nina and I sat in the living room with fresh cups of tea. She looked at me thoughtfully, then asked, "Would you be interested in joining me for an episode of the podcast sometime? We could talk about our experience with estrangement, with rebuilding a relationship. It might help other families going through similar struggles." I felt a surge of emotion at the invitation, at this tangible sign that she wanted me back in her life, not just privately but publicly. That she saw value in our story, in our journey together. I would be honored, I said. Whenever you think we're ready. Nina smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Not quite yet, we're still figuring things out. But someday soon, I think. Someday soon, I agreed, holding my daughter's gaze across the space between us, a space that no longer felt vast and unbridgeable, but simply the natural distance between two adults finding their way back to each other, step by careful step.